Good morning.
Morning.
Nice to see you all here. Larry, it's been a long time. Quite a joy to see you. This morning, I'm going to give a talk that I've titled, True Nature is True Nature. So this spring, I led a discussion group on the precepts. And most of you probably know what they are, but in case there are people who don't, and just simplify it and say that the precepts are teachings that help one who is negotiating the way to see when they're acting from confusion. That's the easiest way that I can put it. And with our precepts, there come these teachings. They are Bodhidharma's precepts of the one mind. They're teachings that go along with our 10 grave precepts. And these teachings illuminate the 10 grave precepts. They open them up in a way from how we might usually take these precepts, how we usually might understand them. And I just thought I'd give you an example. So our first precept is a follower of the way does not kill. And then Bodhidharma's precept of the one mind is true nature is clear and obvious within the ever-abiding Dharma. Not nursing a view of extinction is called the precept of not killing. I'm actually not going to talk about that. Really, what I want to look at is that first line in our chant book, because what I just read was the way it appears in our chant book. And that first line is true nature is clear and obvious. And with each one of Bodhidharma's teachings, the first line is true nature is clear and obvious. And I thought I'd just really quickly talk about true nature is clear and obvious. And then I'm going to read to you another translation that I encountered when I was preparing the precept discussion group. So true nature, what that is talking about is just reality. It's reality. That's true nature. It's truth. It's the nature of truth. It's just, this is it. It's reality. So there can't be anything outside of it. It's not true nature in that there's a false nature. Anything that would be false nature would still be true nature, but it'd be expressing itself as false nature, whatever that means, because you can't ever be outside of reality. So that's what true nature is. It's just saying reality is clear and obvious. Now, this is one where we might start to go, what? How is it clear and obvious? But it's clear in that it's not obstructed in any way. It's just right here. There's just no way around it. In true nature, reality is right here. So we start to do things with reality that I'll talk about later in my talk. And we make things complicated, but here it is. It's clear. And then I could say that even if it shows up as confusing, because we say, reality really confuses me or it surprises me, or I don't really get it. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. So even if it's muddy, again, it's clearly showing up as muddy. It can't be any other way than just what it is right now. And that's also how it's obvious. I looked obvious up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary just to see if there's any kind of wrinkle to it that maybe I was missing. And I didn't look at the etymology, but obvious just means easily discovered, seen, or understood. Easily discovered, seen, or it's just right here, right? So it's clear. It can't, it can't be any other way than it is. And it's obvious, it's easy for us to understand. It's easy for us to, I say understand, it's easy for us to know, might be a better way to put it, because understanding is something I'm going to be talking about again in my talk. So we have true nature, reality, not obscured in any way. It's just right here, and it's easy for us to know because it's just right here. We can know it. We don't have to go looking for it. It's just going to be right there, unfolding itself for us at every moment. Even more so, it's just unfolding in every moment. But here's the thing that surprised me. So you may have heard all this before, but maybe you haven't heard this. When I was preparing for this precepts, I read another translation of the precepts, and they have that same line for Bodhidharma's precepts of the one mind, just like we do, but it doesn't sound the same. It's Robert Aiken's translation. And And his translation says, self-nature is subtle and mysterious. It sounds like it's the opposite of what we have in our chant book. And I think it's mainly because of that word mysterious. And I'm going to come back to that word in a second too. But I actually, when I looked at that, I remember I kind of went, wow, that's a very different take on that first line. But when I started thinking about it, I thought it really isn't, it doesn't obstruct or it's not at odds with ours. It just sounds different. And I think it's pointing at some different aspects of true nature, which is why the title of my talk is True Nature is True Nature. That's really what true nature is. But we can, if we start to pull apart what it is that Aiken's pointing out, we can see that it's really not at odds with self-nature is clear and obvious. So if we look at self-nature, what he's talking about, we have true nature. So I just said self-nature is clear and obvious, but self-nature is true nature. That's what it is. So we're not talking about this self that we usually think of the self, this ego self, this person who's maybe named Steve, or when you were a child, if you were caught doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, or you're being naughty, maybe it was Stephen, right? So that's not the self it's pointing to. The self is just the self that is this outside of which there is nothing. So it's not a self that's opposed to any other thing. It's just this. It's just this self. So self-nature, true nature, same thing. It's just reality. And that word self can trip people up. I've been talking with people over the past week about Uchiyama's teachings on the self. And he talks about the self that is only the self. And if you're like, I don't understand that, it's just this. That's all you really have to understand is being pointed to. Subtle, this is the first interesting word in this translation to me, is subtle. It's subtle. We were talking about it's clear and obvious. So obvious seems to be almost the opposite of clarity and obviousness, or is it? So I think what Aiken's translation is helping us to see is it is clear and obvious. True nature is clear and obvious. Self-nature is clear and obvious. So why do we have problems seeing what true nature is? What's going on there? It is subtle. And it's subtle because we easily get distracted by stuff that's showing up. We get distracted by it. And all I mean by distracted is that it becomes the center or the focus of our attention, no matter what it is. You know, now we're looking at that finger and we're not usually thinking about it. Not kind of going, I'm thinking there's a finger there. You know what I mean? You just go right into it and there's a finger. Now there's an object of mind. And we know our lives. We know that there are a lot of fingers that are popping up constantly. Things are constantly coming. And so and to get through our day, we have to tend to a lot of those objects. Sometimes they get in the way of us being able to take care of our day, but sometimes there are things that we have to take care of. So that's part of the problem, is we get caught up with these things that are showing up. And what do? Well, we take these objects that are showing up. We don't really think about it, but we take them to be the truth, the absolute truth, and nothing but the truth. That is, they are all our experience seems to be is the stuff that's showing up. And so we're missing out on something when we do that. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we get this sense as we do this, as we move through our life, grasping and attaching to the objects of mind that are arising and ceasing in every moment, we feel like something's missing. It just happens. Something seems off. And we think, oh, we hear something like true nature, and we go, that's what's missing. I haven't tapped into yet true nature. It's eluding me. It's outside of me. So I have to go get me some true nature. And so when we do that, we think true nature is going to be radically different than what it is right now. We might hear teachings that say, if you live the life of the one mind, if you live the life of reality, life will you'll be free from suffering. You'll be released from suffering. And you might go, well, my life is pretty, I don't want to say miserable, but there's plenty of suffering in it. So that sounds like something good for me. And maybe you'll hear a term like enlightenment being used to talk about that. Or I'm trying to think of a phrase I just heard. Conversion experience might be another version that I heard, not in Buddhism, that's a different tradition. But I heard it and I went, oh, kind of sounds a little bit like enlightenment. And so we might have some idea and we think, well, this is going to be pretty mind-blowing. When this happens, when I finally plug into true nature, I think about plugging into true nature, suddenly I'm thinking R. Crumb Norm. You remember the cover of Zap Comics #1? He plugs himself into a wall socket. We're thinking it's going to be that. It's going to be like, and I've heard people talk about these experiences they have sometimes, and it's pretty close to having hallucinations for some people. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, and then they want to hang on to that and go, that's it, right? I had the thing that we're looking for. And I just went, well, I don't know what that was, to be frankly honest. We come up with some ideas, but don't worry about it. Just keep going. So it's subtle because we think it's going to be radically different. And it's because what we're doing is we're thinking about what true nature is. But true nature isn't radically different in a manner of speaking from this at all. If we can realize true nature, our life will be radically different. But true nature itself is just this. It's not going to be radically different. It's just this. And so that's what's subtle about it, is we feel like there's going to be some, I don't know, some kind of breakthrough we're going to have, and comets are going to move through the sky and whatever it is we think is going to happen. And then it doesn't happen. We just keep, so if we're waiting for that, of course, there'll be some difficulties. So that's the first thing, subtle. So we get caught up in what we think is going on, and then we feel dissatisfied and we look for the thing that's missing. And we think that when we find that thing that's going to be missing, it's going to really, be different. And it's really just this true nature. This thing we're looking for is actually already here. It's already here. We just need to realize that. We just need to see and understand that by knowing what it is that's showing up. And then mysterious. This is the word I said that probably when you hear that, you go, well, that sounds the opposite. Subtle and mysterious, clear and obvious. But mysterious, I think, in Aiken's translation, what he's pointing to is that true nature or self-nature can't be rationally understood. I think that's what that's pointing to. But that's a problem, isn't it? That word mysterious seems to have so much else going on in it than just you can't rationally explain it. So again, I thought I would just look at the sort of common dictionary definition of mysterious to see what it is. Webster, Merriam-Webster, of course. And one of the definitions, there's actually two different, there's a 1A and a 1B. So I'm going to read 1B first. Exciting wonder, curiosity, or surprise while baffling efforts to comprehend or identify. So exciting wonder, curiosity, or surprise. And I was just reading a book that was talking about our practice as, reconnecting with, this person was using the word innocence. And I think they're talking about that kind of curiosity, that openness to what it is that's going on. But if that's all mysterious was, not such a complicated thing, but it's more than that. So we have that wonder, that curiosity or surprise, and at the same time, it baffles efforts to comprehend or identify. So right there, then we go, what is that? And then we start to think, well, that thing that I can't understand, there's something mysterious about it. That is related to 1A, the definition, which is of relating to or constituting mystery. And mystery is something not understood or beyond understanding. Again, we get to that. If we think about what Aiken, again, what I think he's pointing to is that there is this nature of reality that's mysterious in that it's not something that we can understand, or it's beyond understanding. But that understanding we're talking about, this is what the problem is. This is where the word mysterious gets to be problematic for us. Because when we think understanding, we are talking about thinking. We're talking about using a rational mind. And sure, if you encounter anything, you're not going to really be able to rationally talk about whatever it is. You might think you can. You might start using all kinds of scientific jargon to describe what it is that's taking place. But there always is an angle by which you can come at the thing you're looking at that you're not going to have any idea what to say about it. You're going to run out of things to say. That's the nature of rational thinking, is it has limits to it. It's just going to get to a point where it has a limit. And this then points to what I think is this quality of mysterious, that just something about that word that just kind of catches us. And when we see it in relation to the precepts, it doesn't make sense, is that it's actually, we don't know this. I'm not saying we understand this, but the way that we usually understand creates mystery. We understand, it actually is productive of mystery. So the more that we think we understand, the more mysterious the world seems to be to us, because we start to actually see the limits of what it is that we know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the more we think we understand, that's when you really start to go, I don't really understand what's going on here. Partly because now we have some explanations, but these explanations actually open up more questions. They open up more mystery for us. There's more that we don't seem to know. So that, again, the more we seem to know, the less we seem to know. So I had a friend who was in a bookstore once, and he was gesturing at all the shelves, and he goes, look at all the knowledge that's in this, that human beings have I don't think he said generated, but look at all the knowledge that we have. And I just said, to me, this is like, look at all the new questions that we just brought up. All of these books have more limits to them that need to be discovered. And the more we do, the more questions we have. I think Steve talks about this pretty eloquently in The Grand Illusion. So I don't know if this is clear, but the way that we usually go about our life is actually flipped around a little bit. So we think that when we come to understanding, even true nature is clear and obvious. We think, oh, I see, it's clear and obvious. I'll be able to understand what's going on. Well, not if you do that, then it's going to be subtle and mysterious. Right? If you try to rationally understand what this is. So recently, it was just a few months ago now, I've been giving talks from Steve Hagen's book, Buddhism is Not What You Think, which is a collection of essays. It's a really excellent book, and it's been a great source for giving talks at sessions. And there was just this image in here that I shared with people at session, and I thought, well, most people didn't have the opportunity to listen to that talk. And this, to me, this image or metaphor or whatever you want to call it, but this way of describing how it is that we usually get caught up in understanding the world, and how we get knowing backwards by confusing knowing with understanding. I just thought I would read this passage to you and kind of talk about it for the remainder of my talk. Hopefully this doesn't go on too long, but so Steve says, we don't know what's going on. We don't understand. Oh, by the way, the chapter title, I don't know if I said that. The chapter title is called No Mystery. No Mystery. We don't know what's going on. We don't understand what human life is all about. We don't understand the big question. We're not even sure what the question is. What's existence all about? How did I get here? Where am I going? Why is there something as opposed to nothing? When we ponder these questions, the world can seem mysterious and dreamlike. And there's that mystery that we're talking about. So think about those questions. We have, where am I going? What is human life all about? What are these questions? They're interesting questions because they come from particular understandings that we have. And these understandings that we have are intellectual understandings. So, for example, what is existence all about? well, what do we mean by that, right? We seem to think, well, this has got to have some kind of meaning to it, right? And by meaning, we mean something that I can understand what it is that I'm doing here. It's interesting, I've been speaking with some people now who are much further along the path of life right now, and they haven't maybe thought too much about this, and things are getting pretty puzzling. What is this? What is going on? Why are we here? Why am I here? I'm going, but what was I doing here in the first place, right? So we have these ideas that there's a certain way it's supposed to look. And then there's that thing, me. A lot of these questions are, how did I get here? Where am I going? And again, you encounter these teachings, you realize that I is quite an assumption. What are we talking about when we talk about I? But that's where we start from. We think we know. So we think we know. And because we think we know, we realize we don't really know. We thought we knew. So now there's mystery that seems to arise. And the thing is, we keep asking these questions because we don't know what the question is. And I can't keep myself from making reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, just because they make such great fun with that thing about humans. So I don't know if you remember this, but humans want to know the answer to the life, the universe, and everything, and they build this giant computer, this like greatest computer that's ever been invented, and they plug the question into the machine, and it goes on for millennia, if I remember correctly, and it basically becomes a religion taking care of the computer while it's working on this. So just imagine all the ages that are going by as this computer is trying to work on this, and finally it announces that it's going to give the answer. There's a big, celebration. Now we're finally going to figure out the life to the, we're going to figure out the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And the computer gives the answer, and it's 42. And everyone's like, 42? What does that mean? We don't understand this answer at all. And the computer says, I don't know. I don't know what the question is, right? So we are looking for this answer. We don't even really know what the question is. So even if we got an answer, we wouldn't know what to make of it because we don't really know what the question is. The questions that we have are usually just rooted in assumptions or ideas we have about reality. Steve continues, he says, if we simply look around ourselves, the same qualities of mystery and unreality appear. Uh-oh. So look at what he said. He said, if we simply look around ourselves, the same qualities of mystery and unreality appear. In the first 20 or 30 feet around us, everything seems distinct, clear, and bright. But the moment we venture further, things start to dim. As we look into the outer reaches around us, we don't see anything at all. We don't understand human life. We don't seem to understand what anything is. As we gaze into our own past, the same thing happens. Our own lives fade and dim. We might have vivid memories, but they're all of a world that doesn't exist now. The future is no different. We can speculate and wonder, dream and anticipate, or become filled with dread and fear, but it's all a mystery. And to me, I think, what Steve's talking about here, because if we simply look around, the qualities of mystery and unreality appear just simply by looking around. And that's because when we are looking around, usually we're getting caught up in our conceptualizations of what's taking place. So we see things, we hear things, we smell things, and now we've got these things. What are these things? Where'd they come from? How long are they going to, why do they exist, right? So this kind of stuff, we just very easily just sort of casting about. And we think that this is the real reality. We look about us, we see things that are, and this is important, what he says here. He says that these things are distinct, right? Everything seems distinct. Everything's distinct. And it's because of that distinction that we think we know exactly what all this stuff is, or at least we have an idea of it, but then everything seems to have this quality of mystery and unreality to it. And then, this is what I really like about this image, because he's going to do something with this. So this is the way it seems to us. It's interesting though, right? Here's the stuff, the light is on, we can see all this stuff, and it still kind of has this quality of mystery and unreality to it. And the farther you get away, the more it fades into darkness. So we don't really know And you can do this physically. Begin on top of a high tower and you start looking off into the distance. Right? There's only so far you can see. And the same thing with our lives. You might be able to. I can't. The way my memory's been going lately, I'm not sure that I can say for sure. You might remember what you had for lunch yesterday. But what you had for lunch 47 days ago might be a little harder to pull back from your memory. And then as you go back in time, it gets to be even more and more difficult. Or if you think you know what's going on, and then you have a conversation who is there, you realize that maybe you didn't know what was going on if you've had one of those conversations. I had a friend who, I know I've told this before, but he was a very dear friend of mine. He was an inveterate storyteller. He was one of the funniest people I've ever known. And he would just relished in telling stories. And I was in the presence of him engaging in his storytelling when his wife was there. And she's listening to him and she gets this kind of look on her face. She goes, Mike, that's not what happened. And he kind of paused. He said, a storyteller never tells the truth. But, so the farther we get back, or if we look into the future, there's this darkness. So Steve continues, he says, darkness seems to completely surround us, both in time and space, not just figuratively, but literally. As we look into the night sky, we seem to be surrounded by blackness. So here we are, living this dreamlike existence. The moment we step away from the bright circle of our immediate concerns, our immediate surroundings, our preoccupation of the moment, everything becomes dim and dark. So again, this is just how this is how we see our life. This is all bright, distinct. And then the farther we move away from that, we seem to be surrounded by darkness. And to me, then he talks about how this life seems dreamlike. When we think about that, when we realize that's kind of how, it's a good description, metaphor for how we kind of put together our understanding. Then this dreamlike quality seems to pop out a little bit better because with that bright circle that's around us, that's our dream. That's all the stuff that occupies us. And outside of it is this darkness in which this dream seems to appear. And in fact, earlier in this chapter, Steve quotes from The Tempest, this line that we're probably all familiar with. I think it might actually be quoted at the end of The Maltese Falcon, the movie version, if I remember. But we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. That's great. Shakespeare is great. And that's the way we kind of put this together, So we're such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Steve says, but to those who are awake, reality is just the opposite. And it's like, what? I still remember, I read this, this is just so beautiful because that first image of the 20 to 30 feet around us being lit and then everything dimming out, to me, that's already pretty powerful. So then to have it turned around like this is kind of startling because at first it was like, yep, that's it. Wait a minute. Reality is just the opposite. The only mysteries are in the details of our immediate concerns. What? We're not sure why the computer won't work, or what made that thumping sound in the garage, or what happened to the book we enjoyed so much. Well, that's a tough one for me right now. Where's that? I was just reading that book. Where did I put it? We always place it on this particular shelf in this particular spot. These small fragments of darkness are always close at hand. But to the awakened, what surrounds this darkness and us is light. There's no mystery. Reality is clear, obvious, and metaphorically well illumined. If you pay careful attention to your actual experience, this is what you'll find. There's truly no ultimate mystery at all until we grasp, right? Until we go, I got it. And when we got it, we realized we ain't got it. You're going to realize it at some point. So what I really liked about that is how Steve points out to us that it's what is distinct to us. It's the stuff in that circle of light, the stuff that's immediately around us, that's mysterious. And again, it's because of what I've been pointing out. It's because the lights are on. It's distinct. Everything. I got this. I'm not sure that I do got this. Because we create mental forms out of it. We go, we don't do this consciously. We don't go, that camera exists right now. We don't think of it in that terms. It exists. That's how we take it to be. Usually it just happens like that. But what we're overlooking is the true nature of anything that's showing up. We're overlooking the fact that all the things that are appearing are impermanent. It's not that they possess impermanence, because again, that's the way we'll hear that teaching. We'll think that, oh, okay, well, that clock's impermanent then. It's here for a while and it's gonna fall apart. But it is actually impermanence expressing as that clock. And so we have these objects that seem to be illuminated around us, and we take them to have substance. We take them to be here, even if for a very brief moment of time. We think they arise, stick around for as long as you're going to stick around, and then go. And when we start thinking that way, of course, you can start seeing questions like, well, where did it come from? How long is it going to be around? Why is it around in the first place, depending on what the object is that's showing up? Where's it going? Right? And then that stuff gets applied to us as well. If you just start to the same thing, like, where did I come from? Where was I? That question I asked myself when I was a young boy. Where was I before I was born? And trying to think about that. So going, well, I know I was in my mom's belly for a while, but where was I before that? It didn't make sense that I would not be there, but that seemed to be what was being spoken of. So now we're in muddy water just by the things that are around us that we can clearly see. This is where the muddy water is. We think it gets more mysterious as it moves away, but it's actually right here. Here's where our questions arise. And of course, Steve starts out with those kind of just simple things, like, why doesn't my computer work? It's really not that simple. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even tell you why it's working. Ask me that. Why does my computer work? We don't ask that, though. Why is this working? But we are in muddy water, right? When we grab hold of these objects, when we take the mental forms and assume them to have existence. And the reason we're in muddy water is that, again, we've come to the limits of what it is that we know. And we want, we'll say, we might realize that things are unclear to us. And we really want to know what's going on. And I have no in my notes here, I mean, quotation marks, because we're talking still about that intellectual understanding. We still want to, we want to know, we want to kind of get through the mystery of it, and we can't. And we can't because we're still getting stopped at the appearances. We think, even if we think, okay, this is the way it is, and this is a common metaphor, that there's this world of appearances, and they're misleading at best, maybe false, and we can peel them back, and then the real thing is revealed, right? The Wizard of Oz, that scary glowing head with the big jets of fire, make me tremble when I was a little child. It was terrifying. And then the curtain, remember how the curtain opens? The great trickster character in that movie, Toto, grabs the curtain and opens the curtain up. And there's that old man wheeling those wheels and doing all that stuff. That's the way we think of it. I was going to pull the curtains back and we'll expose it all for what it is and we'll really see what's going on. And well, what's that guy now, right? Who's that old man whirling these whirligigs, right? So now you've got some other curtain you're going to have to pull back again. And then there's something else you see, and that's more and more curtains keep arising. We're getting caught at those experiences because we're mistaking just experience. So the way it's showing up, seeing, tasting, touching, as the objects that seem to be the things that we're seeing, tasting, and touching. And what we usually take to be darkness, that's the stuff that we take for being something that we can't know, because it's out of the realm of our lights, right? It's out of the realm of that circle that seemed to be illuminated. It's out of the realm of distinct objects. And in fact, it's not an object. And that is how it is we can actually know it, because it's not some object we get stopped at. It's this aspect of experience, we can say, that we overlook. That subtlety that Aiken's point was bringing up, awareness, awakeness, just being here. This is right here. That's the thing that's right here. All the stuff we think we're seeing, well, that seems to elude us. I remember when I was first starting to pay attention to birds again. I can't remember what drew my attention to it, but there was one bird that I really wanted to see. And I think it was just in a bird book I had. And I went, oh, indigo bunting. First of all, the word indigo, I'm already interested. But indigo bunting is this beautiful little bird. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but wow. As I say, they're just a beautiful color of purple. And I was like, and they're here in Milwaukee. We actually have them here in Minneapolis too, but they're here in Milwaukee. So I want to see those things, you know. And my husband had a pair of binoculars. It was actually his dad's binoculars from when he was in the Navy back in the 1950s. So we had this old pair of like Navy binoculars, you know, that we'd look at birds with. And one day I was up in our apartment, we're on the second floor, and I saw this spot of like brilliant purple, a bluish purple down on the lawn. And I went, I think it's the indigo bunting, you know. So I grabbed the binoculars and I ran downstairs, knowing not to just run up to the bird. It was around the corner. So I just carefully stepped around the corner and it was there. And I put my binoculars up, flew away. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? It's down there. You know, I went like a couple, 3 blocks down, but I could see it because it was so vivid. So walking very carefully, I get about another block, flies away again. And I went, damn you, indigo bunting. But that is the nature of these objects, is they seem to elude us all the time. And it seemed like such a metaphor for how we're really trying to see what's going on, and we can't. It always seems to elude us, and yet it's going on. It's going on. It's the stuff that, you know, it's not the stuff. It's not the stuff. It's just, this is going on. And the way that Steve puts us then is that this is actually the light. This is, I remember one way Steve put this, awareness, awakeness. This is lights on. You know, this is what, in a manner of speaking, illuminates us all. This wouldn't be here otherwise. But we need this aspect of experience that we overlook, even though it's always right here. It's always right here. It's right here. It's nowhere else. Those objects, they are going to be coming and going. They're going to be coming and going, but this is right here. Thus, coming and going thus. It's just right here. And it's obvious. It's like when we talk about here, if you've ever done that, where you first go, well, you encounter the teaching of here now, and you just, you can even think about it. And I would, again, encourage you to release that thinking, you know, to treat it lightly. But even when you think about it, you do realize that no matter where you are, here you are, right? So we can even intellectually understand that, but it's just here it is. And that that is awareness. It's just always here. It's always now, always here, always now. It's this always aspect. Always here, always now. So Steve, conclude my talk here. Steve says, the Buddha said, be a light unto yourself, betake yourselves to no external refuge. Why? Because there is no such refuge. It's pretty simple. Nor is any needed. Now that one's a little tougher for us to hear, I think. The thing you want to reach for to sustain you and help you is merely a construct of your own imagination. I'm going to read that again. He's got this one italicized. The thing you want to reach for to sustain you and help you, that thing that doesn't seem to be here. When you overlook true nature, and then something seems to be missing. It seems to be somewhere else. True nature. Oh, true nature is where we're released from suffering. That's not right here. It's not right here. So now we kind of picture what that is. He says that is merely a construct of your own imagination. Ultimately, it will only hinder you, perpetrating your feeling of vulnerability or perpetuating. It's better instead to just look at the situation you're in and see immediately and directly what's going on. If you do this honestly and earnestly, you'll see that you're already sustained, complete, and whole, and that everything you'll ever truly need is at hand. And that's hard for us to hear. Sometimes this doesn't appear the way we want it to appear. So we want there to be something else. But if we just look at what this is, immediately and directly, that's it, without the conceptualization, without the ideas, without getting caught up in all of that. And we can see that this is, and again, he says, honestly and earnestly, so really being honest about this. And when it gets tough, that's where that honesty is really required, because it's so easy for us to try to do an end run around it, right? To try to avoid what this is and then explain our ways out of it. But if we do this honestly and earnestly, you'll see that you're already sustained, complete, and whole, and everything you'll ever truly need is at hand. It's right here. And this can be realized right here, just by hearing, H-E-R-E-I-N-G, hearing, realizing here, to realize it's already here. Then no mystery. It's already here. Clear and obvious, yet subtle and unexplainable. Thank you for listening to me. I don't know if people have questions or observations they want to share. Yeah, Larry. One moment. We're going to give you a microphone so the people on Zoom can hear you.
Boy. That's good. Speak right to it.
You just hang on to it. You don't have to do anything with it.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I liked your analogy of the light and dark, and things outside the immediate light sort of appearing dark, but I don't remember exactly where you put it, but I was gonna say, I lead meditative hikes both up here and in Tucson, where we go out at night. And in Tucson, I lead them in Sabino Canyon, and I always tell the people, turn off your flashlights. Because when you're walking a flashlight, it's kind of like the analogy of light and dark outside. You're enclosing yourself in this little circle of light.
Yeah.
And so if you turn that off, then you can experience and see the beautiful nighttime light, that's out there. Whereas if you're in this little circle of light, that's all you can see, and you can't really experience that. So
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Arizona, they are very conscious about trying to preserve the purity of the night sky, I know. So yeah, right. That reminds me that one of the images in traditional teachings of darkness is wholeness, right? Where those distinctions that we usually make, that little, I really like a flashlight because there's such a limited pool of light to it, that when we do that, then there seems to be this separation between ourselves, this little pool of light, and then the vastness of all that.
Right.
And when we turn that off, it's like we join it. We've always been part of it, but now we can realize it because we're not caught up in that little circle of light. So I appreciate that image. It's great. Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, Peter.
Thanks. Steve, thanks for your talk. You said a lot of things, kind of opened up a lot of interesting things. So maybe if you don't mind, would you talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Douglas Adams story and you talked about the Wizard of Oz. We liked the mystery and we have the questions, but often there's always this risk we're going to be really disappointed when we get the answer. We don't like it. It's like, actually, you know what, close that curtain back up, put the wizard back out there. You know, I don't want to pretend like the old man's not there. Do you mind just talking about that a little bit, about the need to sort of maintain the mystery, and we want the answers, but at the same time, you know, the answers might really let us down.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, that wanting to maintain mystery. Now, there's two ways we could do that, of course. One is to just allow things to be. So again, mystery, the way that I was taking Aitken's translation of mysterious as being, which is that we just really can't talk about this. And so in this way, it's mysterious because we can't say anything about it. But on the other hand, we like something that has a little more pang to it than that. I think, if I understand what you're talking about, right? That what I think is actually us tasting that quality of reality that can't be explained. And we realize there's something in that feels, I don't know how to describe it, sublime, maybe, you know, knowing what you're talking about. And when I was first encountering this before I ever took up this practice, it was just a feeling of like, wow, or whatever it is. But that kind of mysteries, that's what you're talking about. And the fact that if we try to like explain it, it seems to maybe take some of the wow out of it. Is that kind of it? Yeah. So if you think about the Wizard of Oz, for example, which I think is a great example, where you got that, still for me to this day, I look at that image and I go, how did somebody think of the floating skull with the, you know, and he's got that voice and all of that. And then you find out it's just some old man, do you know what I mean? Which again, has its own mysteries to it, but it's certainly of a different sort and not nearly as exciting as the floating skull. But I think it's because we have that, you know, that feeling of wow, or the sublime or whatever it is. And then we start doing things with it again. And it might feel like it's something that's outside of this, that maybe the only way I can do that. And let's face it, we all do stuff like this, is to perhaps go to the Grand Canyon, which I know I've had that experience. When I went to the Grand Canyon, it was like, and yeah, I did say, wow, because we're human and we do dumb things like that. Sort of feel the splendor of all that up. But so we go looking for that sense of mystery, and then we don't want to explain it. So I think what we're really doing is we're tasting. You can do it with the night sky as well. So bringing it back to Larry's example and then to that sense of being connected with one. I realized when I was looking at the Grand Canyon, just as an example, that what I was experiencing was actually a sense of timelessness. And there was something about that whole, it just seems to be outside of time. And so I think what's happening is that we are tasting this true nature, and it's something that we tend to overlook. And then when we taste it, because it's something that we usually overlook, it seems to have a pang to it. Maybe we're just sort of let go of something for a second. We're so, it just was like, and then there was that little buoyancy or whatever. And then we read something into that feeling. And it's that feeling then that we ascribe to. It's the sense of mystery. You know, it's that, oh, that's what I want. So now I'm going to try in my life to bring up experiences that have to it. But of course, what we're doing there is we're saying then there are experiences that have to it, whatever that is. And are not now, I guess what I'm thinking of is because I'm a movie guy, but you guys know 2001: A Space Odyssey. You know that movie, Peter? And it's got like that black monolith, that whatever the shape that appears, and there's that Penderecki music whenever they show the black rectangle, and it's these ethereal voices. Oh, and it sounds, because it's this shimmering kind of dissonance. It almost has this spacelessness to it. I mean, or spaciousness, however you want to put it, but you can't. It just, and it is about the perfect sound for infinity that I've ever heard. And then so we think we need to have experiences like that, not realizing that every moment is actually that. Every moment is that, but we have ideas about what that is. So I think that's what trying to respect that mystery is double fold. Maybe it's a realization, let it be. I was a music major, and I was going to study musicology, and I started getting interested in music theory, and people would ask me in college, they'd say, "Oh, what's your major?" And I'd say music. And I wasn't a performance major. You would not want to really have heard me play my baritone horn, but I loved music and I wanted to study it. And so I'd tell people what I was doing. I said, "Yeah, music theory." And they'd be, "Oh, what's music theory?" I said, "We kind of analyze music." Analyze music? You're taking all the mystery, all the beauty out of the music when you analyze it. And there's some degree of truth to that. It really depends on what you do with that. But I think that that's the sense we have, that really it's maybe best to just leave it alone. Just let the beauty of a flower be the beauty of a flower. And yet at the same time, we have this other idea where there's that thing, the scent, the beautiful scent of flowers, perhaps, or the colors or whatever. And we get this sort of wowiness to it. And we think that's what it's all about then. So to me, it kind of has this kind of complicated thing where it's both, we're realizing something about true nature of reality, but we're getting confused about it. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that is a great question, because we really do want to keep that mystery. We don't want it to be some old man turning to cranks. But again, we're really just getting caught up in that image of what the more mundane thing is. And we can actually see that even that explanation then starts to have its own mystery. If I can just toss one more mystery in, just because I listened to this yesterday, and it's just something I was just saying, it reminded me of it. It was about the fact that the scientists who've been studying whales and listening to whale songs, have you heard about this?
Yeah.
They think whales have an alphabet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, speaking of mystery, so they thought they knew what the whales were doing, and they got these were sperm whales actually, and they're going, "Oh, their songs, we all know is it the gray whales that have the beautiful, those beautiful moving, and the sperm whales, if you've ever heard, they're like this." And they could pick out little like rhythms, like a sperm whale might go. And they came up with like 26 different things like that. And some other scientists went, "You guys are looking at this data set the wrong way. I mean, this isn't how I would look at data." So they took the little sound waves that they had, the little charts of sound waves, and they turned them on their side. And they went, "Oh, there's a lot more going on here." And they went from 26 things to 152 different things that were being done by the sperm whales. That include tempo and all kinds of things. And now they're going, "Ooh, it looks like they got an alphabet." So the next question is, do they have words? Do they have grammar? We don't know. They don't know. They don't want to try to pin it down too much. They don't want to, it's that wonder, that innocence I was talking about. They want to close that down by trying to explain it. So anyhow, I just thought I'd toss that out there because it was something I encountered recently. It was very interesting. So any other observations or questions? Yeah, Kristen.
I said I wasn't gonna speak today because last week, actually Wednesday, we had a discussion about attachments, and ever since then, in every moment of every day, an attachment has arisen in the tunes of like hundreds or thousands, and there's about 3 of them popping up right now. However, I'm having one of those Arnold Horshack moments where there was such this, something that you said was so inspiring that I just wanted to share it. This idea of there is no refuge. Oh, I obviously, if you heard me, I was sniffling because I was crying, because to me, this is like the most profound singular idea of life, right? Okay, like ice cream, like when I have my blizzard, I don't need my blizzard to make it through this day. I don't need my 500 pine trees. I don't need this. I don't need this. Everything is right here. And it just blew me away. It was mind blowing because again, that's it. I mean, that's it about life. It isn't anything but what we are. So that's my epiphany and my crybaby moment that I had, and my Arnold Horshack moment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, one of the image that I like to use, because everybody has either been there or seen something like this, that's sort of along those lines. It helps us to see that about refuge is just getting caught out in a rainstorm, you know? So if you've ever done that, where you get caught out, some raindrops are starting to fall and you go, uh-oh. And you start to look for some place where you can get out of the rain. And if you happen to, I don't know, first of all, if you happen to have maybe a newspaper, the old put in the newspaper you had, but then it really starts to rain. And then you're kind of going, oh, and you're looking, and at some point you realize there's just no way that you're going to get out of that rain. It just ain't going to happen. And there's this relaxing into the rain to getting sopping wet. There's a freedom to that. I've experienced it myself, but I remember driving down the street once. It was pouring rain out, and there was just a guy, and he had that body posture that was just, he had just stopped trying not to be getting wet. And in that was freedom. You know, no refuge. Right here it is, getting sopping wet. We think, oh God, I'm still, I guess, a little bit like that. Mary was reminding me, but when I was a little kid, if I felt the slightest sprinkle of anything, I'd be like, Mom, it's raining out. We got to go inside, you know, trying to get shelter from the storm, so to speak. So I appreciate that, Kristen. We have 1 more minute. Any further comments or questions? Yeah, Larry.
About your, I just want to say something else about your experience in the Grand Canyon. I had somewhat of a similar experience when I, the first time when I went to the Grand Canyon, I'd read a lot of things about it, and, you know, I'd heard a lot of things about it. And then I was driving along, because when you go up the Grand Canyon, it's all flat, you know, until you come right to the edge. And I remember it's one of the few experiences I've had in my life where literally took my breath away. When I got to the edge there, you know, and it's flat, and then you get to the whole thing opened up.
Yeah.
You know, and that was one of those kind of rare experiences. But then when I started to do my hiking up there and solo backpacking, I'd be out there for days. And then I really, by being inside it, is when I really realized the vastness of it, as well as the element of timelessness, you know, because it's very illusory down there. You look at things that might have happened a few, you know, yesterday, a few years ago, 100 years ago, rocks here, you know, maybe 100 years, thousands of years ago. So, but it's the experience of actually being inside it, I think, which really is sort of the most meaningful, I guess you might say, because then you didn't look at it from a distance, you were right,
Yeah.
you know, right.
You turn that flashlight off again and joining it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. It's beautiful. You know, so I'm not saying don't go to the Grand Canyon. Go to the Grand Canyon. It's beautiful. All right, we're a minute over, so thank you.